Tom,
Hello, Tim. I'm a little late because I think I'm the one that clicked on the wrong link this time.
you're forgiven.
Thank
You're
you.
forgiven. You're forgiven.
Come-
At our age, if our age, you can't make a couple mistakes a day, life is miserable.
That's right. That's right. Keeps life exciting. When you're forgetful, everything becomes brand new.
Good point. A good attitude.
Right. Just like a friend of mine once said, he was Catholic, good Catholic. When you're retired, every day is Saturday except Sunday.
A friend of mine who had been retired young because he sold his technology business said the only way he knew it was Sunday because of the fat newspaper that he got on his front door.
Ah. You mean the fat newspaper gave him the clue that then he had to go to church?
Maybe not. Maybe not. Hey,
Okay.
John.
Good morning from Palm Desert today.
Palm Desert.
What kind?
Okay.
And so what kind of temperatures are you having out there?
It's in the low 70s, a little bit breezy. Just had a beautiful hawk perched on the sidewalk outside my window.
Wow. That's incredible.
Okay, George Ferrick seems to have joined the wrong meeting too. I'm going to send him a text.
Was it one of the links that you sent?
Yeah, I think one of the links was a wrong link.
Ah.
So,
Yeah, I had to dodge around a little bit to get to you.
yeah.
But the one you did this morning works.
Yeah, the one that said last minute link.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
but I think that may have been the wrong. I don't know. That's the one that I'm on there right now. Where can I get George Ferrick? He's not.
How are you feeling, Johnny?
I'm still a little bit foggy on things, but and pretty heavy headache when I get up in the morning, but I think it's dehydration. I just perspired a lot last night.
So how do you distinguish between the natural fogginess of being 80 or nearly 80 and your injury? I would have a hard time making that distinction.
I'm having a hard time, and I'm going to get some counseling from the healthcare people. Yeah.
Good. Do you have any pain?
Just headache.
Just
And
headache.
the rest of my injuries have just about cleared up.
Good.
Yeah.
Glad
a
to
little
hear
bit of
that.
stiffness in one hand, but I'm at my Palm Desert home where I took the trip and fall. Matter of fact, I took a picture of the curb that I tripped on to send to the homeowners association because it is a little bit difficult. Hey, George Crook.
Hi, George.
Hey, Georgie.
Got your sound on?
Oh, do I? Let me think.
Yes.
Let me
No, you're
think.
good.
Yes,
You're good.
You
Yeah,
do.
You're good.
We hear you.
Hey, Timoteo.
Buenos noches. No, what is it? Buenos dias. Yeah.
I know something or other.
Would you remember Walt Daspit, who was 2 years behind us? I think he only stayed in the junior sem a couple of years, but he was a nephew of Father Art Daspit.
I don't. I was going to say I only remember the priest. Wasn't he the guy who taught us Latin for a while?
Yeah.
And would
Yeah.
come in the room saying some greeting in Latin. What was his greeting that he would do for us?
Salvete Domines.
Salvete Domini.
Domini. yeah.
Domini, yes.
Domini. Yeah. And then we would always say, Lecitne nobis exuere jaceta nostra. Can
We would say
stop
that.
jackets?
Could we take off our jackets?
You could.
Are you sure we said that, Welbers?
We said a reasonable facsimile of that. And I always, okay, George and his iPhone are, there we go. Here comes George. Ferrick. And I remember we asked that in BJ McCoy's class, and he said, "Oh, take Latin."
Oh, my.
Hello,
Yeah,
George.
he didn't
That's
understand.
embarrassing.
it.
Mr. Ferrick, how are you?
Ferrick.
Hello,
Hey, George.
I'm glad to be back from travels.
Good.
Had a great trip.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Yeah, good pictures.
You know, the commencement experience was Sunday at Willamette University, which I think is the oldest university on the West Coast.
Oh,
I can
Wow.
recall. Yeah, it was founded by Methodists for people who'd gone across, the pioneers, maybe Lewis and Clark, etc. Anyway, it's a modest campus, and Saturday was raining, and then Sunday they had a huge tent up with folding chairs, but it turned out to be sunny when the commencement started. But the commencement itself, it just had a wonderful vibe about it, and the commencement address and the student address and the chaplain's opening and closing prayer gave it kind of a spiritual feeling to the whole thing. It was just a marvelous experience.
Who was the speaker?
The speaker was Jada McKenna, and her middle name is an African name. She's an African-American woman who's the head of Mercy Corps. Yeah, TJADA McKenna. Tom, if you can look her up if you're doing that. Anyway, it was a marvelous talk. She seems to be a Christian person. She quoted Howard Thurman, and the quote served as the basis for her remarks, to kind of search for your genuine self. That was kind of and then she said there are 3 ways of finding your genuine self and so forth. Anyway, it was a whole thing about public service. She's a public servant, and she's been involved with nonprofits. And the latest one is Mercy Corps, which is headquartered in Portland, I believe. And it does some outreach. I'm not exactly sure what it does, but anyway, it
Well,
was.
I read.
Yeah.
It was founded in 1842, and coincidentally, this summer we're taking a caravan, an Airstream caravan from St. Joe, Missouri, following the Oregon Trail all the way out to some destination spot that was on the Columbia River.
Oh,
And the first big caravan, that's not word. What is the word? Wagon train. The first big wagon train that ever went to Oregon was 1840. And so as part of our study for this one, we're going to spend a month doing it, is we had to read a couple of different books written about that journey that were based upon some wonderful people kept diaries back in those days.
Yep.
They kept diaries, and so they're diaries from some of the women who were on the first wagon train, diaries from some of the guys who were herding the cattle because they took their own cattle, whatever they could scrounge up, they would take it and drive it along on the wagon train. The wagon trains were pulled by oxen. And so it was quite, St. Joe was quite a flourishing embarkation point for the wagon trains. And sometimes the wagon trains that were heading to California, and this is pre-gold rush, would follow the Oregon Trail, or would follow the Oregon guys until they got to a point in southeastern Wyoming, where they then would shoot down and kind of come in across the Sierras. And I think that's where the Donner Party one time
Yeah.
separated from the Oregon group. But these wagon trains had hundreds and hundreds of wagons at a time. It was just something
Oh,
else.
really? That big?
And the ruts are quite visible through many parts of Missouri, Nebraska. And so the Oregon Trail Historic Society has kind of mapped out an itinerary that we will follow. And there are some of these spots where the ruts are 2 or 3 feet deep, and these wagons would go over or through the ruts done by previous wagon trains. It's kind of cool. And there were a number of Indian trading posts. The Indians generally were very friendly. There were very few Indian-related deaths for the Oregon pioneers. And the Indians, smart folks that they were, would set up these trading areas. I guess we would say maybe every 500, 600 miles, where they would trade their skins, beads, and things like that for whatever kind of goodies that the wagon train had. And so the trade-off was the wagon train people would give the Indians smallpox. They would then die out, and then, but that's how a lot of the Indian artifacts got communicated back to the East. So we're looking forward to it. It's going to take place from the middle of August to the middle of September. So we're looking forward to it.
And are you going at the same speed as the oxen?
Well, my
Which must have been.
pickup truck is a little quicker than oxen.
Yeah, what was with oxen carrying these wagons, it must have taken forever. My God, you can
It
just
took 90
imagine.
days. 90 days. If they could make 15, no, excuse me. No, I'm wrong. It would take 6 months.
Yeah,
And so they had to leave at the first blush of spring. And if they could make 10 or 15 miles a day, that was an accomplishment, because they had to ford rivers. They had, when they were going over the mountains, some of the mountains they had to cut the trees down so that the wagons could get through the forest. It was
Yep.
really amazing what these folks did. So they must have founded Willamette University right away, George.
yeah, pretty soon. I think they did it for the people who went out there and settled. They started this Willamette University, and I believe it was Methodists that did it.
The first pioneers were Methodist preachers that would go out with their families.
I think
And-
there
and
were, at least they were included. Yeah. It'd be interesting to research that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Robert.
That could have been the trail
Yeah, Bob.
behind him. We're just talking about the Oregon Trail, Bob.
Whoops. Have to unmute.
Ask to.
There we
there you
go. Finally got there.
All right.
How are you,
welcome,
Bob?
Bob, did you have difficulty getting on?
No, I had running a little late.
Okay. Because I think there was some confusion in the links that I sent out. I don't want to go back to them, but you made the
Oh,
correct link.
Yeah, we have to stop you from confusing all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You're not alone
Hi.
in that, my friend.
Yeah.
George
Yeah, my
Ferrick,
message.
can we
Yeah.
come back to you and that speaker at Willamette. And if I heard you right, the topic was finding yourself, and how much of, quote, finding yourself had to do with your selection of mentors or companions. Was that a significant piece?
Um, Well, it wasn't explicit, but it was implicit in that she was obviously quoting Howard Thurman, uh, who I later looked up, and I'll spend a couple minutes just describing him. You may have heard of him or know him, but obviously he was a mentor for her, if not in person, at least his writings. And then the chaplain was quoting, she was an African-American woman also, and she quoted or used one of Howard Thurman's poems as part of her prayer. So I looked up Howard Thurman, and very interesting person. He was actually the mentor for Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, could I interrupt just a second?
Sure, sure.
Speaking of prayer, we haven't
Yes.
prayed.
Oh, thank you, Tom.
Does somebody have a prayer?
I've got one here.
Okay, good.
I'm going to pull out how about this? A Carol Houselander poem
Okay.
in
Wonderful.
line with the Mary theme that we had last week. So,
Thank you, George.
okay, so here it is. It says, see if it is. There's two of them, and let me find the right one here. Okay, here it is. I brought my flower and flame to the crucifix on the wall. But for the word incarnate, not one white star of them all. A white star, I guess, is a flower. This is,
Huh.
so here she is going before a crucifix, and then but for the word incarnate, not one white star of them all. To Christ, the living and dying, crucified in mankind, blunt nail in a quick flesh, sharp thorn in a sensitive mind. My candles have burnt out at the carved archaic feet, while I pass the poor man by with broken boots in the street. I have said to the worn face of the polished, dark worn wood, Lord, Lord. I was mute to love's substance in flesh and blood. I have beaten the closed door and asked for a sign from God, while the dry stick in my hand flowered like Aaron's rod. I have strained my mind for a word out of the broken cloud, while Christ stood by and cried from a broken heart out loud. I have been deaf to the pulse of the heartbeat of the women who carry the seed of the world's wheat. Because my neighbor's need has been simple and like my own, Christ, the close friend of the hearth, the known, has been unknown. So to me, I get the contrast between kind of honoring a symbol, a crucifix, and then overlooking the incarnate Christ and human beings all around us. That's kind of what I think she's reflecting on. That's what I got out of that.
Mhm. The guy with the boots.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Thank you, George. Well, I watched the tape from last week of you guys, and it's the first one I really watched all the way, and so I have come to admire Fred Lawrence all the more because I guess he watches all of them that he's not able to participate, and I was really struck by your guys' conversation about Mary, particularly when it came to the Virgin of Guadalupe. and Crook and Chevere, you guys seem to have a great depth of understanding and knowledge about Guadalupe. And in this area where I live here in Western North Carolina, it's a big agricultural area. And so there's a need for a lot of Latino, predominantly Mexican, farm workers. And I don't know that I've seen a pickup truck, Mexican pickup truck, that does not have on the back window of the pickup truck one of those Virgin of Guadalupe decals on it. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just everywhere. And so and in our church, there is a huge shrine to her. And what they have is they have maybe a statue that is maybe 6 or 8 feet tall. I think it's made out of some substance that's easy to carry. And when we had the Franciscans here, every December the 12th, the Sunday closest to the 12th, there would be a huge procession from one of the city parks. Sunday Mass. And I would say hundreds and hundreds of people would march in the procession. And the cops were very solicitous and, blocked off the streets and all that. And then after the Mass was over, we have a big ag center, an agricultural center nearby that can seat thousands. And so what they hosted is a homemade, not restaurants, but homemade food and drink and dancing for the whole rest of that day. And it was just such an unbelievably glorious celebration that brought together, gringos like us, as well as every Mexican, I think, in the area. They no longer, COVID brought an end to it, sadly.
Oh, yeah.
And sadly they did. But it was, so the Virgin is everywhere here because we have so many migrant laborers. They're not all migrant laborers, but we've got so many, craftsmen, guys who work in the construction business and all of that. So I enjoyed listening to you guys talk about Mary. It was really quite edifying. And then the transition that, I don't know how the transition got made to the abortion question. I don't know what that segue was, but, and that was not an easy thing to listen to, not at all easy to listen to.
I think that transition came because there had been published the letter from the New York bishops. Tom,
That
does
was
that
it,
track?
yes.
Right, I think so.
You're right, Johnny. You're right. Yeah. A
And
friend of
sleep well.
mine, a friend of mine, a former nun. I mean, she, taught in Catholic schools in New York City, Catholic, schools headed up by nuns. And so she's just a retired nun. And she's a very outspoken person. And so once a year, the Knights of Columbus will but they will have what they call a right to life big exhibit as you come into the church. I don't know what day of the year they choose for that. And Rita is her name. And in her own way, and she would say, you know what? She said, this parish is filled with right-wing Republicans. And maybe the better way that they should say it is not a right to life, but a right to be born, and then you're on your own after that. And it was caustic, probably very true, given where I live. Is that people would say, "Well, no, you shouldn't be able to have an abortion." Not to debate that issue.
To
But
whom
then
is she saying this, Tim?
To me and
Oh,
said,
just
to me
you,
and Sandra.
okay.
Yeah, we were in the vestibule, and she said, "Look at all this." She said, "Do you think they would support childcare? Do you think they support nutrition programs?" No, they don't do any of that kind of stuff. But she said they call themselves right to lifers, and she said, "I think that's the hypocrisy." And I did not ask her.
That was
nor
a
do I really
significant part of that letter by the bishops of New York State, Tim, if you haven't
It was
seen
great.
it.
No, I
Yeah.
did read it. Yeah, one of you
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, I thought it was wonderful. I just hope they put their money where their mouth is. You know.
That's what they're calling for. Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, is there any? I mean, we all live in different. I guess George and Tom, you're in the same diocese, but George, you're in a different one. Bob, you're in a different one. Johnny, and we're. I mean, is there
Orange.
anything coming out of your bishops on that issue that you're seeing?
Not from my bishop.
Not from, as near as I can tell, not from the president of the US Conference of Bishops,
Which is our guy.
which is our guy.
Yeah.
Bob, how about when you travel around? Do you get any sense of that from your past travels throughout the United States, visiting various parishes, etc.?
With regard to what?
Supporting women who choose not to have abortions, you know.
I never ran into that kind of issue or question or attitude or stance. I mean, it's
Uh-huh.
floating around all over the country, but I don't remember it being a significant issue in any particular place that I got to, and especially in any churches I was at.
Mhm.
Oh, we better do something because we are not being heard. I mean, the church's view of the sanctity of life is just not being heard. You know, like there's a woman here running for in Glendale, California, running for city council. And, you know, her flyer was left on our porch and I was reading it. And she says, I am endorsed by Planned Parenthood. And I intend to turn Glendale into a sanctuary city for abortion.
No way.
That's too rich even for my blood, you know, and I'm you know, it's the way we fall, this group falls on abortion just intrigues me. I mean, you've got Ned at one end, I would say, and George Ferrick at the other, and the rest of us somewhere in between. And I always think of myself as kind of right next to George Ferrick, you know, going to the left. But when I read that, it just so pissed me off. She's running for city council and she wants to, you know, use the position to create an abortion sanctuary city. So I got to do an email to the priests in our parish saying, somebody, let's go get her, you know, from the at the end of mass, just mention it that this is preposterous and, you know, we can't take a stand on candidates, et cetera, but we could at least point this out. And then I looked up her website this morning and shit, I was ready to vote for her by the time I read her website. I mean, she's a spectacular candidate. You know, a young Armenian American, born in the old country, came here at age 15. UCLA public affairs grad, just an outstanding prospect for a public servant. And, you know, she's got a great future ahead of her. But she's so immured in this pro-choice thing that I wonder if she knows there's another, well, of course she knows there's another side, but I wonder if she knows that there's any nuance to it at all, you know? But I didn't finish my email to the pastor and the other priests because there's no way she's not going to win this election, you know, and she should win it. We'd look like idiots if we said anything to critique her. So I don't know what the relevance of that is, but it's a moment of discouragement.
Well, it's increasingly becoming a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, I mean, to me, it's so evident that the real problem here is polarization. Nobody is advocating a moderate stand. Nobody is advocating.
Oh, there
nuance.
are people, Tom. There are people who are advocating a moderate stance who are
And
not
you.
for abortion, but they're not for eliminating the right for people to have an abortion.
Right.
I'd
but-
say that's a moderate
George,
stance.
doesn't it
That's not
appear
got into
that it's,
it doesn't
Well,
get
that's
into the
me,
political
George.
arena. It really doesn't. It's supporting the right to choose or criminalizing abortion. Those are the two things that are within the political and public arena. The majority
Tom,
of the
isn't that-
United States are nuanced, yes. But
Isn't that kind of the center of gravity of our group?
Well-
You know, I argue this with Ned probably once a week. And, you know, lately I've been telling it, Ned, you know, if we're going to be the church of forced pregnancies, I mean, that would be immoral I think, to say you have to stay pregnant once you are pregnant, and we're going to descend upon you or your physician with the power of the state. We can't do that. And
Yeah, well, let me jump in here because I had the same, I listened to the whole 2 hours too, pretty much all at one time or two different sessions. And I found it painful, as Tim did, to listen to it. I listened and I found I really resonate with Bob. Most of the remarks, I resonated with what Bob said at the end. My wife has a story to say. She grew up in an apartment building in New York, and her father had a stroke in an elevator, and the doorman went and got somebody in an apartment who was a doctor. He was a Jewish doctor, and came and ministered to her father, and helped him, maybe saved his life as he had the stroke there, recovered from it. Anyway, they became friends with the doctor, and my wife, she must have been maybe in high school or something, and she never knew anything about this, but the doctor worked in the emergency room, and he had stories about women that would come in from self-inflicted abortions, trying to abort their babies using a, hanger or whatever, knife or all kinds of stuff. Just tragic stories of that type of thing happening. And so that affected her very much. And I just don't believe in this hard and fast view. I go back to what you said, Bob, about conscience. So with that, I mean, when I listen to you say that, I think of we don't walk in the other person's moccasins, and it's easy to judge unless you've walked in the moccasins of the person. So I just, we're not a Catholic country. I think Catholics have every right to espouse everything that you're saying, George, and everything that's Ned's saying, but to make it the law of the land, when there's a variety of different viewpoints, I just don't see labeling people who are pro-choice is kind of not concerned about human life, or not, they're concerned about the context of human life. People who see that a person who's been raped should bear that children have no realization of what it's like to be in that young woman's body in person experiencing that. And so to judge and make it impossible for that person to get an abortion, to me, is just, I'm for the right of that person to make that decision.
well, George, you understand, you're not lumping me with Ned, are you?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah, no, because I'm more.
No, but I mean,
far more
I hope you don't, I hope you're not one of those Catholics who say, well, I'm not going to vote for that woman now because she's pro-choice,
No,
and vote for
I-
somebody else who's terrible in so many 99 ways, but you'll not vote for the person because she said the wrong thing that you may be misunderstanding.
No. I thought she was an overwhelmingly qualified candidate by the time it was
Yeah, but
all
until
over.
she made that statement about making Glendale a sanctuary city, I mean, that's kind of a California thing to do, making a sanctuary city for immigrants, or
Yeah,
she's
George,
just saying, yeah,
George, I think we are all more nuanced beyond that black and white attitude that you're criticizing. So I think we could
yeah, no, I think you are too. Yeah, yeah, I think you are
move
too,
on
but I
beyond
think,
that. It,
right. So
but I
I'd,
was lamenting was that an absolutely, totally otherwise qualified candidate does feel the need to get votes by buying into one element of an extremist rhetoric.
Yeah,
That's a
I
good
don't
point.
think
And,
she
and
needs it.
the fact is that, Glendale's not going to become a sanctuary city for abortion. That's a rather silly.
I sure thought so. I don't think it's going to get her all that many votes.
Yeah,
My concern is that she, obviously a person of goodwill, et cetera, is contributing to the ever wider acceptance of abortion as something that has no moral dimension to it.
yeah. Now
You know,
I'm seeing it, quite frankly, that what she's contributing to is the impossibility of dialogue about this.
yeah.
As are some of the people that Tim was
As
describing in his parish.
on the other side.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't find a candidate who is saying what you read a lot in good commentary, that, hey, this is an issue that we need to have some nuanced and sensitive discussion about, and come to a public policy that we can all live with. Now, what you
Well,
have
but
part
there's
of
no
all
way,
candidates is one extreme or the other.
but there's no way she and Ned Shavira are going to agree on a public policy.
I'm not so sure about that.
Well, I hope I certainly hope I'm wrong.
I think that we really do need to get a public discourse going on, okay, what are the values of human life that we can all agree on? And if we're going to make exceptions for divergent points of view, how far should those exceptions go?
That was kind of what Crook just said, is could Shavira ever support her, was kind of like the dilemma that I think a lot of folks faced in the 2020 election, because Republicans and a lot of priests in this area hammered Biden because he was pro-choice, and that was like a dark cloud that covered over any of his other policies. And so that this woman in Glendale, why the hell even bring it up? Why not talk about your experience? Why not sell yourself on other qualifications? And so I think Welbers is right in a way, is by these candidates positioning themselves that the central theme of their campaign is abortion. I think it hardens people's attitudes. I think it further divides us. We had a young guy who was my congressman, who fortunately, happily, was defeated in the Republican primary, and we got this massively expensive flyer from him a week or so ago before the primary, which was last Tuesday, saying, I support rigid rules about abortion, prayer in school. I mean, he had a litany of things that he was in favor of. And every one of them were what I would call cultural issues. He didn't want to talk about Would he support Ukraine? What would he do about climate change? And so I think that what's happening, at least from my vantage point, is that candidates who are running for office in this midterm election that we're having, it's all going to be cultural issues. It's not all, but I think the majority of votes will be based upon cultural issues, which is like weird to me. Just political science background, I just find that amazing that people are not asking, what's your opinion on tax policy? What do you think about foreign policy? What do we do about China? What do we do about, foods? I mean, no one wants to,
Infrastructure, yeah.
yeah, no one wants to talk about that. And
The
so I think,
Democrats do.
but the Democrats do, but
are the worst.
George, if from what I see, is that if you ask Chuck Schumer what's the biggest issue he has to deal with, it's abortion. So what the hell? Why?
It's a great
So-
fundraiser.
Is it?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
It
I'm
is.
sure it is. Yeah.
a lot of California money goes into the Democrats' coffers. A lot of Hollywood money over that.
Tim,
Why?
can I go back to you for a minute, Tim?
Yeah.
What if you held everybody accountable to what do they mean by the common good? Because we elect people to support the common good. And what I'm hearing is people carve out one corner as if it were the major issue of the common good.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And so it is keep the Mexicans out and keep these Mexicans out of the country and don't allow abortions. I mean, like the governor of, was it either Nebraska or Oklahoma, is going to sign a bill that outlaws any abortion from the moment of fertilization. And so these guys, they have this, it's like a sledgehammer. And 10 years ago, you couldn't get a Republican publicly to support rules or laws against abortion. I mean, they dodged it like crazy. All of a sudden, it is kind of like the litmus test for a Republican candidate. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Beyond me.
My hunch is that there's very conservative media, Fox channel being the primary one, that are very ideological, and the Republicans have teamed up together with the conservative evangelicals, and they
Yeah.
want that vote. And the evangelicals have pushed that very, very hard, that, their convictions, faith convictions, need to prevail, on a variety of fronts. And one of them is abortion. So they're pretty hardline completely with that. And the Republicans need the vote of all the conservative Christians, And so I think that's why that takes such a strong hold of them. And the media, I think, is just dumping this on constantly. I don't really watch him, and I don't know much about him. I read a little bit. The New York Times has a 3-part series on Tucker Carlson, but he's operating in a completely different world. He's over in Hungary now, trying to argue that the United States has to get leadership like Hungary has out of this guy that's running Hungary now, and he keeps voting himself in. He's got complete control of the country. And I think the Republicans, want that. And so they've got so many people siloed. You're either this or you're that. And the Republicans, I think, and the Democrats, to some extent, they've moved out into the extremes, as opposed to, kind of serious shared discussion that can reach a place that everybody can kind of be in touch with one another and respect one another. And I think that this may not be fair because I'm no expert on them, but it just seems to me that the the conservative evangelicals are so absolutely sold that they've got it right and nobody else does. And the country should be run by what they believe. And they want the government that's going to do that. And Trump has played that like, it's his ace. And he keeps working on
And
it.
so Crook and I had a long talk this week, and one of the things that we were talking about was that there was a real threat in this region for protests last Sunday against Catholic churches over the abortion thing, because they saw it, the pro-choice people, according to what the police were saying, see the Catholic Church as being the major obstacle to their attitudes. And I was telling George, I said, that is just unbelievable to me, because I can't tell you the last time I heard a bishop in North Carolina or South Carolina speak out against abortion, whereas the Southern Baptist preacher in this town, which has the hugest church, is constantly talking about abortion, against abortion, that the Pentecostal guys are talking about it. So the anti-abortion movement is not coming from the Catholic Church. I mean, it ain't coming from us. It's coming from, as you were saying, Bob, it's coming from the evangelicals, the Pentecostals, the Southern Baptists, and yet I'm not seeing any blowback against them the way you are against the Catholic Church. So it's kind of many things mystify me today, and that's one of them. Yeah, is that they seem to get off scot-free on that issue.
Mm-hmm.
So is anybody in the middle ground? I mean, not among our group, but do you see any chance that, for example, in California or in Ohio, that a candidate who takes a nuanced middle position like Welbers or something has a chance in hell of getting any campaign support, money, or anything like that, and being able to be successful?
Well, I think there's very little chance. There are a few. One of the reasons why, well, there are two groups that I do contribute to and support. And, my own political affiliation is with the American Solidarity Party, the ASP. And so I contribute to them and have a little bit of a voice in their stuff. I'm not really active. The other group I contribute to is Democrats for Life. But they don't have big money behind them. And neither one of them seems quite able to get a message out that can appeal to the people who want to be kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
But they are there. They are viable, but it's a long road for them to really get anything significant on the ballot. I mean, there are a few pro-life Democrats still in legislative positions, but they're a decreasing number, and a lot of big money is fighting against them too. Because they're not going to get Republican support because they're not Republicans, and they're not going to get the Democratic Party official support because the Democratic Party officially is unrestricted pro-choice.
How did that happen?
So
one of the senses that I have is that the Democrats are responding to the dignity of women, that the women need to have the freedom to live according to their judgment of their life. And so I think this unrestricted argument for abortion, and I think it's unfortunate that they're absolutist on that side, as opposed to finding a middle ground that everybody can live with, which is what has happened, I think, in large part in a lot of Catholic countries around the world where abortion is legal. Italy would be a part of it, but the church is not making a big issue of it because I think, I don't know that much about it, but I think there's respect for people, that you can be anti, you can be pro, but you respect people who stand on a different side, and especially women, that they're the ones that have to in the end make the decision. So I think that the conservatives are going absolutist, as somebody said in Oklahoma. It's from conception. You better not touch it. You'll be in jail or whatever. And on the other end, anybody can get an abortion at any point that they want to. And even though that's a pretty rare thing, my sense is that late term abortions are not frequent. They're exceptional.
They are not frequent.
Yeah, but it's so they pushed it all the way out to that. So anyway, I think that that's kind of where we are, and I think the Republicans are. That's their key to getting control, in the future, in the next, with this Congress, and then, along they want to get Trump to come, and if not Trump, DeSantis, and I think they want. I mean, this is my own worry that they want to take control of the country and keep it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Ample evidence of that, Robert.
Yeah.
Oh, so, those who aren't part of this call will have to listen to this tape, and they will have the same feeling that Tim had over again, that we're spending another hour on this abortion thing. I have an hypothesis that prior to this year, with the whole thing of Roe versus Wade coming up, that people were talking about the middle ground. People have been doing that state by state, location by location, dialogue taking place. But when the specter of eliminating it, making it impossible to have abortion comes up, that's where you get the two sides, because the other side has to fight back. It's kind of like Ukraine against Russia, if you want to use that analogy against it. So I think, a lot of people say, well, I'm really against abortion. I would never want anybody in my family to have one, and I would never want to be faced with that. And I don't think I would do it. But who am I to judge other people in other circumstances? And I sent in my email yesterday the Irish case, which led to Ireland permitting abortions.
Mhm.
Kind of extreme situations, and so I think that so I don't, it is nuanced, and that's why I think a lot of other Catholic churches in other parts of the world aren't saying anything. They're leaving it up to people, just like, I think, Tom, are you the one that said that Pope Paul, when he said, well, how come you didn't say anything about contraception, when it could, he said, well, I thought Catholics were deciding for themselves. That's why I didn't say it's okay to birth control is okay or whatever. Did you say that, Tom?
Yeah, that was
Some-
something that was in that biography of
Yeah.
Jacques.
Yeah.
That,
Let the people decide. So I think that's why that people aren't saying that. They're saying, okay, let people, this is a very difficult area. There's a lot of circumstances. And so let the dialogue take place, let people, and I think it's happened. It's already happened. It's like, what more is there to say? It seems like it's all out there.
There's, I think I try to imagine the rage of a lot of people, women, who are confronting a law that'll say you can't have an abortion. Uh, and they're not going to say, oh, I disagree with that. I'll vote. I mean, they're going to be enraged. And to a degree we can scarcely imagine. My brother and his significant other are in Washington and Seattle, and they're going to be engaged in helping pregnant women find their way to Washington to have abortions, you know, kind of an Underground Railroad type thing. And they think that's what they should do to handle this.
And that could be a good thing to do. I'm going back to what you're saying, Bob. I think if people are doing that for some, you know, what if there's a mother of 3 children who's right at the end of her wits and she finds out that she's pregnant and she's contemplated killing her kids and herself, and she's going to have another child, and that makes a difference between, you know, whether she takes the life of her children and herself and can, you know, what would be, you know, sure, it's not ideal at all, but those circumstances themselves that she's in are not ideal to begin with, and she can't change them. So who's to judge? So I could see your brother, if they help her come up to get an abortion, so be it. You know, why should I say she's immoral or be against it or make it impossible for her to do that, you know?
Well, but George, you always give the example of a woman in extremis.
Well, I've always been for people in the margins. Yeah, people
right.
in extremis. There's a lot of people in extremis that we've neglected for so many years.
There's a lot who are. I mean, I agree with you about the people in extremis. I really do. But, you know.
Well, these laws are getting rid of the extremists. They're not even
know.
allowing for them.
I know. But
so I'm angry at that myself.
You know, the ethic of abortion is now, you know, there's a lot of people who get abortions because, damn, I was up for partner and I'm pregnant and I want to be a partner in my law firm. And
yeah, I know.
That's
right. There was
an extremist.
Well, there was there was an Olympic athlete that got an abortion because if she were pregnant, she wouldn't be able to compete. She said, so I got an abortion. I don't agree with that. Yeah. But that's no reason to take the option away from people who are an extremist, right?
Well, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
I agree with
you know, one of the problems in the United States, which is not a problem, I think, in most other countries, correct me if I'm wrong, countries that have voted or legislated to allow abortions tend to do so because they're not necessarily, I mean, in most places, it's removed from whether or not it's a right. It's rather a way to deal with a difficult situation in our society in a compassionate way. In the United States, however, for the last 50 years, the Supreme Court has ruled that every person has a constitutional right to an abortion.
Yeah.
You know, so we've taken it from the forum of you know, what is a good thing to do, what is a good thing to accept for the common good, how much of things that are wrong should we accept for the common good, and make judgments on that basis rather than is it right or not.
Well, Tom,
that's well said, Tom. That was well said.
Wade said this is a right. Then there was no evolution possible on the subject. There had to be revolution for there to be a change.
Yeah.
And that's where we are, and that's what we're going to get.
Yeah. Now, Roe v. Wade, as I understand, basically said there is a right, but that restrictions are legitimate to that
reasonable
right.
Restrictions
yeah.
for the
and and
None
Casey,
in the first trimester,
Okay.
but the
And-
second
and-
trimester, yes,
and Casey did away with a lot of that, right?
yes.
So Casey kind of resulted in basically a right to abortion without or with very, very minimal restrictions.
Who did
Yeah.
that? You said
With
Casey?
Casey.
Casey versus Planned Parenthood.
Uh-huh.
That the second abortion decision of the Supreme Court, which was what, in the 1980s?
Oh, okay, yeah.
If we're ready to move on, I have something sort of funny that might be a good bridge. Are we?
Good.
I'm reading a book sort of by accident on the Council of Constance. And
George, the Council of what?
Constance. A city.
1400s, right?
The what?
1400s or
Yeah.
1500s, 1400s, I think.
Yeah, it's the council where the Avignon schism or the schism ended. And they were able to select a pope and strong arm the pretenders into resigning, and one of the latter was John the 23rd.
Mhm.
And he had been, his name was John the 23rd. And he had been charged with all kinds of nefarious crimes and so forth and disgraceful things. And part of the deal was that the charges against him were largely dropped. And Gibbon, the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Gibbon, wrote this sentence to describe the deal. He says, the more scandalous charges were suppressed. The vicar of Christ stood accused only of piracy, murder, rape, sodomy, and incest. And so
So what were the charges that were suppressed?
I don't know. I have no idea. I thought I was getting I got confused. I thought I was reading about the Lateran Council, which adopted the yellow star for the Jews and so forth. This is interesting. The
Oh,
vicar of Christ stood accused only of.
George, I got an email from Ned saying he had a doctor's appointment. How is he?
I don't know anything about him having a doctor's appointment.
Yeah, it was within that half hour before our session began that he couldn't make it because he had kind of an emergency doctor's appointment.
He said, I think I got the same email. He said on an emergency basis, it was shifted from 9 to 10:30 or something.
Something like that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, next Friday, I've got a doctor's appointment at 10 and I couldn't get it changed. I tried to get it an afternoon, another day, but apparently that's the only time that my doctor has. So it's for an annual physical. So,
So back in the day when we all were busy with our various careers, when did we ever fit in doctor's appointments? It seems to me that one of the classic characteristics of being retired is you spend all of your time managing your doctor's appointments. And I don't know, was it just that we, it is amazing to me, just amazing.
I can't tell you how much time I'm spending managing doctor's appointments. I mean, on Monday, I had a bone marrow biopsy.
Wow.
Next week, I have a colonoscopy and an MRI. The following week,
Wow.
I have a angiogram. I mean, it's just.
and there are so many types of doctors. There's the podiatrist that I went to last week. Then there's a skin doctor, and then there's there's no end to it, is there?
And
Yeah.
so, Crook, why did you have a bone marrow? thing done?
Because there's something weird going on with my blood. And I've had for the last 40 years a very weird condition called hemochromatosis. My body doesn't get rid of iron. And so what they do is they will take out 500 cc's of blood every now and then, throw it away. And my body, in generating new blood, leaches the iron out of my organs, and thus I continue to live. They didn't figure that out well into the 1950s, and this was an absolute death sentence. If you got this disease, you died. Nobody knew what to do. So now they have that. But strangely, in the last couple of years, I've gotten anemic. Now, how can you be anemic when you've got too much iron? You know, it's a mystery, as Cardinal McIntyre would have said. So they just, and so as a result of the biopsy, I have colonies of white blood cells that I shouldn't have really. And this can lead to a condition which I haven't really looked up yet called myelodysplasia. And my wife looked it up yesterday and says, "Oh shit, George, if you get that," and you know, the doctor doesn't think I will, she says, "It'll shorten your life expectancy by 3 to 5 years." And I said, "Well, how do you measure that in an 80-year-old, you know?"
Well, if that's, well, from 100 to 97, George, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
What the heck?
And so when you have a buildup of iron, is there any physical manifestation that you experience, or is it
No.
only something that's shown up in tests?
Yes, the latter. But
Okay.
but that's because they diagnosed it very early. It has an onset in middle age in males. And lo and behold, when I was 45, what's more middle age, you know? I went in for a checkup, and the guy said, "You have a very elevated iron count, George." And when he palpated my stomach, he said, "Oh, you have a swollen liver." And I said, "Well, what would that be?" And he said, "Well, it would be, how much do you drink?" Okay, it's not cirrhosis of the liver. It could be cancer, except you're too healthy. I don't know what it is. We'll have to do a biopsy. And when do you have a liver biopsy, gentlemen? That's great fun. But lo and behold, it was iron accumulating in my liver, and it wasn't symptomatic yet. And they cleaned me out, you know, with this method that I described. And they just go in, and out comes a pint of, it's like giving blood to the Red Cross, except they throw it away. What was I going to say? It's still a very undiagnosed disease. Darlene Shavira's sister's husband died of it.
Wow.
His doctors never identified it, and it mimics other diseases. It was the iron was piling up in his pancreas, interfering with the production of insulin. So they thought he had diabetes. So it was, okay, dude, you know, don't drink beer, don't eat chocolate, and it's irrelevant. But I'll never forget, she referred the wrongful death case to me and a colleague of mine. And here I am how old was I at the time? Oh shit, I was in my 70s, sitting in an office reviewing medical records, and his iron count when he was the earliest one of record was almost identical to mine when I was diagnosed. And the difference is I had a great doctor and he had some idiot. And he died in his 50s, and here I am, 80.
So, George, what's the name of that again?
Hemochromatosis.
Hemochromatosis.
Tosis. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just asking because I have a friend who is a liver pathologist, and I'm just
He'll
going to
know all
run.
about it.
I'm going to mention it to him, and also that the anemic thing that's come up. Yeah,
Yeah, that's weird,
yeah,
So
Yeah, it's-
back to Tim's question about how much more we're involved with our healthcare now. I
uh,
didn't get a clear feedback. I
You
don't
did
have a
for
strong
me.
opinion.
Way too much.
Yeah,
I'm thinking back over the last couple of months, how many occasions Ned has missed our Friday friends because his doctors must only have office hours on Fridays, it seems. What about you, Tom? Are you healthy?
I'm healthy. I see my, I have an annual physical exam, but the problem that has had me seeing doctors off and on over the last 12 years has been the prostate cancer. But other than that, I see the doctors as needed. The ophthalmologist is more frequent than normal, I think, because I have glaucoma. And then the bout with radiation and continuing hormone treatment for the prostate cancer that I had the prostatectomy back in 2009. But other than that, so far so good, knock on wood.
And so you're taking hormones. You're still doing the hormone treatment?
Right, I probably will for another 6 months. I go in for another shot next Wednesday. It's a shot that they give you that basically shuts down androgens, shuts down testosterone.
Is this
And
going to
you're
be kind of
menopausal.
is
Pardon
it,
me?
is it going to be like a gender transformation with you?
Well, I can identify a little bit with some of the gender transition people. My voice hasn't changed, I don't think. I still have facial hair, but
You getting boobs?
and so on and so forth.
You guys know to each other too well.
Let's
Yes.
No, this is the
There are
organ.
let's put it this way. I am gaining a bit of weight, and distribution of body fat is showing some modification and that sort of thing. And I won't go into any further details.
Well,
But-
let me tell you a funny story. I hope you find it funny. And so when we lived down in Florida, my very best friend was Sandra's gynecologist. And so he came down with prostate cancer. I guess he was, and Bob was one of these irreverent guys. He went to Assumption College in Worcester, Mass, and was kind of one of these always irreverent kinds of guys. And so when he had prostate cancer, one of the treatments was hormone therapy. And so most of the women in our group were his patients. And so one of the days we were out having dinner or something, drinking, and he said, you guys won't believe the women. I'm getting hot flashes.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
Sandra just said, well, you fucking son of a bitch. Now you know what we've been going through all of these years. And they just laughed their asses off.
Yeah.
That he was now experiencing some of the symptoms that they had that he had never said. He always would say, oh, you're making it up. This is not true. And so they just got a kick out of the fact that when he was doing this hormone therapy, he was having the same things they did. I thought
I have hot flashes, and it sort of has become, well, okay. I'll shove the covers off my bed for 20 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Certain times of night, and put up with feeling temperature different than most other people do from time to time. That to
Yeah,
me, that's fine. I
Tim,
do.
I'd like to go back to you on that question and ask, what about the medical industry becoming more invasive and the financial motives of the medical industry getting more proactive?
What did you mean by invasive?
Doing more tests, asking us to come for more appointments. You know, you remarked about how we are so much more involved than we were when we were in our careers. But I
Yeah.
think our offspring are more involved than we were.
Do you?
Not mine,
Mine, yes,
really.
Okay.
yeah.
Well, George probably suited a number of doctors in his career. I think a lot of the testing is cover your ass.
I
You know.
suspect that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't.
the only medical malpractice case I ever did was Ned's brother-in-law,
Oh,
actually.
okay.
And that the defense attorneys just said, look, we got $1 million malpractice insurance policy. Will you take that to settle the case? And that was like on day one almost.
Wow.
They just had no defense, you know.
Mhm.
Misdiagnose a fatal disease.
And
Mhm.
so did she take the money?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And you know, the widow and the kids did okay. California law favors doctors, though, in big cases like that. You can only get a grand total of $250,000 for emotional damages. You know, and here you are, it's a death case, for God's sake. Your father and your husband is gone.
Hmm.
You know, and that's only $250,000 for
Mhm.
3 people. There were 2 kids and a spouse.
Hmm.
You know, but you know, back to what Tim said, I remember Al Kroll. He and I used to hang around a lot, and he said to me one day when he was, I guess we were around 50 or in our late 40s. He says, well,
No.
George, you know, we're getting to that age where, you know, all the maladies are going to catch up with us. And he says, you know, next time we see each other, one of us is likely to say, well, how's your prostate, Al? You know? And I thought that was such a hoot when I was 45. And now I'm missing a prostate, you know, because I had a radical prostatectomy.
And so what is Crowell doing? Does anybody know anything about him?
George Ferrick does.
Yeah, I know a little bit. Yeah.
Who?
He
Ferrick.
was a guy we were in school with.
He's in San Francisco, and he's an interesting guy. I met him at his ex-wife is married to my brother's ex-wife.
Oh,
Whoa.
See if you can figure
We
that
must-
out.
I think we missed something there.
Yeah,
Well, one of his ex-wives, first of
Yeah,
all, George.
one of his ex-wives. Yeah, he seems to be in a good relationship with a woman who's as I think she's involved in speech therapy or something. Really, very nice. I met her at one of the family events. Al and his ex-wife and so forth. They have a son. I forget his name. George, you may know. I don't know, but
Nathan.
something. But they have a very kind of connected connected relationship in terms of family gatherings. But
fits the
So I-
profile of San Francisco, right?
yeah, so Al's written some books about marriage. He's a marriage and family therapist. And I don't know if he's still practicing or not. I think
Well,
he's
how
one of
long,
those-
how long was he a priest before he left the priesthood?
maybe 6 years or
I was gonna guess 5.
six,
you
yeah,
know,
5,
could be
6.
7.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't recall.
yeah, something like that. Maybe 5, 6, 8, 7 years.
And he was
Who was-
very involved. I mean, he and Bill McLean famously preached. They were at a parish in near Orange County. By that I mean not deep, dark Orange County, but barely across the frontier. And they decided they would preach at all the Sunday masses against the Vietnam War the same Sunday. And they did, and it sort of got the attention of a lot of their parishioners. And then Al's next assignment was Resurrection in East LA. Right, that's where Moretta is now, where Moretta is the pastor. And he was very involved in the whole social justice thing. You know, the Chicano moratorium and the Chicano walkouts from the crummy high schools and all that. And but then he decided to leave and did.
And then he
Well, he
went to
was-
he went to Northern California, and he was involved living up in Napa County someplace and doing some woodworking and into composting and so forth. And then he got the divorce, and then he went to San Francisco and got his marriage and family therapy license. And from there, George, you probably know more, but he was, I guess, married a few times and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting marriage counselor, you know, physician heal thyself. But I used to say, and I don't know how uncharitable this is, I hope it's not, but it's true. I used to say there was no fad that went through the Roman Catholic priesthood in the early 1970s that Al Kroll did not at least temporarily embrace. You know?
Really, really.
Yeah. And do you disagree with that, George?
I agree. Yes.
Do you? It's interesting.
Carl
That was my
Rogers,
impression in the
Newman.
seminary too.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. You know, one of the most beautiful things about this friendship that we have now, and Bob, you may be able to relate in your own case, is that we all have known each other since we were, what, 13 years old?
14, 13.
14.
14 years old, 14. I can't even do the math anymore on how many years that is. And it makes me, and when I think about our gatherings here, you know, a day or two later over Jack Daniels and on the rocks, it is how imperfect and incomplete our opinions of each other were in high school compared to now.
Well, it's
And-
not like we were frozen in time, you know, in high school.
Well, I know, but see, you guys, some of you have had the luxury of seeing each other so that you could see the changes over time. For me, you know, it's, you know, other than one occasion where Johnny and George and Ned and Teddy Howard and I got together, I think in the early 90s, you guys have just been a wonderful memory. And it has been such a neat journey for me to see, okay, so the guy in the center of my screen is Tom Welbers. And John's on one side, George on the other, and George is at the bottom. And then Ned, is that you guys are no more like I remembered you to be than the man of the moon. Now, Crook is close. Crook is close. Crook is close.
To the man in the
Yeah,
moon.
I
Are
don't
you
see.
saying I'm immature, Almy?
I just don't see any maturity in Crook at all, but you know, or
Good.
but this is that, and I'm sure Bob, you think the same when you go back to the guys that you were in junior seminary with, that you see now, and you say, geez, you know, you really turned out well, you know. And so this group is such a joy to me because it's like a time warp happened, you know. And so it's a pleasure. My Friday afternoons are a pleasure to see you guys. And it makes me think about if I was advising young kids, and the reason I'm bringing it up is one of the guys in my Curcio group is very actively involved in confirmation formation with teenage kids in our parish, you know, and he's talking about how so-and-so is just not, doesn't have his act together, or someone else is very much, and I just want to say to him, Dave, we don't have any idea what the next 40 or 50 years will bring to some of these teenage kids. You just don't know. So it's part of the fun thing about this group to me, is being able to see the transformation apart from Crook, you know. Yeah.
So Bob, how do you feel about witnessing this?
Well, I think it's great that you all get together. I think it's you kind of, most of you are out in California, right? Except Tim, you're down in,
Yeah.
you're on the other coast, right?
Yeah, North Carolina.
And George is up north,
Yeah.
Ferrick.
So you've all had different journeys through life and have different skills and all that. So what, Tom, are you the only one that's still in active priesthood?
Well, of the group of the 6 we're on now, yes.
Yeah, and Gary Lombardi.
Also
Yeah.
of, and
And
then
I think that's great. You know, I have one classmate from actually got to know him. He was in my class. We weren't in high school together. He went through one of our high schools here. You know, but we have a good relationship. And then there's a couple other guys that are older and younger than me, and a guy that I didn't know that well, but you know, we have every second Wednesday we're getting together. Now we have a 92-year-old Jesuit who's bright as hell, who got thrown out of our diocese into the next one.
You know what the issue was?
Well, first of all, he had been a university president. He had quite an interesting background. He had got a doctorate, I think, out at Stanford. He was highly educated, and had a very thing. And he was down in West Virginia at a university there for, I think, 12 years, something like that. Anyhow, he got older and he came up here because our bishop at the time was a Jesuit, and I think he invited him in. And so he became a pastor. And one of the things he did is he had his own way of going about things, because he said, I'm a scientist. And scientists are always doing research. They're always trying different things. They're trying to get a different outlook.
Yeah, they want evidence-based
Yeah.
practices. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, as opposed to, well, this is how the book tells you you're supposed to do this. So it was over RCIA. And he was not following the book for doing the RCIA and the parish where he was. He ran the place very successfully. The school was collapsing and ready to be closed. He built it back up. It's over 200 students now. He did a lot of renovation in the parish. He had a lot of people involved. And over, I think, 5 or 6 years, he brought in 55 people into the community. But he was doing RCIA his time. Well, our new bishop came in, and whoever the priest was that was sort of in charge, you know, on his staff, he wasn't following the book. And so the bishop told him, I want you out of my diocese.
Rather than just follow the book.
Yeah, Oh, yeah, he wasn't gonna, he tried to talk them into the benefit that he was having. He basically used it as sort of a university thing where he did reading of the RCIA and all the things that they needed to come to, and then they'd have, I think, a monthly gathering. They had a little community group. I mean, it seemed to be he was wonderfully effective as a pastor. Wonderfully effective, wonderfully. I did amazing things. And then somebody from down in West Virginia wanted to give him $4.5 million to build a gym, I think, in some kind of a hall for the parish over there. Well, the diocese wanted it for the diocese. She didn't want to give it to the diocese. So they both lost it. So in any case, I think we have this little fivesome that we're really, he just joined us, maybe he's been with us for 3 meetings or so. So my classmate and I are together, and the other guy, he was never a priest, but he's a theologian that preached at one of our, taught at one of our only university, Catholic college university here in the diocese. And so I got to know him belatedly because he played tennis with another guy who had become a priest under me. He left, he got married, has families, but he's back in his home base there. So it's a very interesting group, and we're all coming from sort of different angles and directions, and it's very enriching. You get into a lot of interesting stuff. I'm enjoying
wonderful.
this.
Yeah.
How do you guys?
Blessing.
You
Yeah.
guys had a bishop, in the, I guess, early 70s,
Malone. Jim Malone. Yeah, he was great.
I was at a thing in DC for diocesan people engaged in social justice work, at which he got an award. And it was just very obvious. The man was absolutely revered, am I correct?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
he was one of the authors of the atomic war document that Bernardin had cooked up in the 70s, I think.
Probably was, yeah. He's not famous for that, but he became president of the council. He was the first mere ordinary bishop who was elected to be their president. And that was after he went through a cancer thing that they thought was going to kill him. He was supposed to become, he became our bishop, was ordained in late 50s, early 60s, and he was auxiliary until the bishop, whose name was Walsh, died. And so he was the ordinary from 66 to 96. He was supposed to, the presumption was that he was scheduled to go down to Cincinnati as the archbishop after Bernardin was moved to Chicago. But then he came down with cancer, and everybody thought he was going to die, but he didn't. He got treatment up in Buffalo at some special place there, came back, and he was with us for the rest of his career. And I think we revered him. He was a wonderful, wonderful man, a wonderful bishop. He was transformed by the Second Vatican Council. He was
Right.
Sessions. He was a hard line, hard nose, his way or the highway. But when he came back from the council, the priest said, the guy's really different. It's not like he used to be. So anyway, he was with us, Malone, great guy.
How many priests do you have?
We have about 46 at this point. When I was ordained, we had 176 or something like that.
Híjole, how many Catholics?
I'm not sure what that statistic is. Let me see if they have it here. I don't know that they do. It's been going down. Youngstown suffered a lot.
And so you're not in the Dayton diocese?
No. I'm up in Northeast Ohio.
Northeast, is that near Cleveland?
Yeah, 6 counties against the Pennsylvania border.
Okay.
Yeah. I had relatives just across the border in Pennsylvania. Some of them actually moved to Youngstown, long deceased.
My mother is from Youngstown and my dad from Beaver Falls.
Really?
Yeah.
Joe Willie Namath from Beaver Falls.
My cousin Bert was his fullback at Beaver Falls High.
Way.
There we
Small
go.
world. Yeah.
Small world. Yeah, we
Because
have,
it's still alive.
Yes. Very prosperous. Calico Corners. He opened a fabric chain.
Okay.
Bert Kerstetter.
yeah, you asked about Youngstown Diocese. In the 6 counties we are, it's 1,042,000. And we have 146,000 registered Catholics. Youngstown itself used to have, I think, the number was 180,000 residents. I think it's 60,000 now. And by
Wow.
and large, the larger community, the Youngstown area, the county, we keep reducing in the number of people that we have here. Akron has gone the other direction. They lost a lot of their industry, but the headquarters all decided to stay there. So Akron has flourished. Youngstown is still trying to find a way to get up the ladder again.
My wife and I walked precincts for Obama in Akron.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Wanted to go to a battleground state, you know, which Ohio used to be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We have a Democratic senator who's good.
Sherrod, yeah, Brown.
Yeah, he's Brown, and our Congressman Tim Ryan, who's from our diocese, he's the Democratic candidate to offset the loss of the Republican who's retired.
Is that Portman?
Yeah, Portman. And, you know, Trump had to come up and he went for this J.D. Jansen or something like that.
Vance, J.D.
Yeah.
Vance. Yeah. Hillbilly
Yeah.
Elegy.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm very interested. I don't know if you guys have discussed at all your thoughts on the reorganization of the Vatican that Pope Francis has effected. I'm and you know, changed a lot of stuff. I think a lot of significant stuff. I'm wondering if any of you have paid attention to that, have any observations of it.
I have, and of course, Mary the Undoer of Knots, but also more inclusion of women there.
Oh.
Bob, could you say something about it? It seems like you're more up on it than we are.
Well, he's been kind of trickling over his 9 years now as Pope. He kept making kind of modest changes and kind of combining different offices that were all doing their own thing and all this sort of that. And, you know, he had this 9, it started with 9, I think it's down to 6. He may have rebuilt it a bit, but the cardinal from up in Boston is the American representative, and the cardinal from down in Honduras, yeah, he's been the key guy with regard to it. So, you know, they lost a number of the older guys on it, but anyhow, he was very consultative. His whole disposition is listen, you know, let's get together and talk. And these were not guys that held official positions in the Vatican. They were people out scattered around the world running significant parishes. So little by little, he made adjustments here and he made adjustments there. I found him always to be very much of a gentleman. I'm going to use Cardinal Sarah as the example that he was trying to reverse the liturgy, following in the footsteps to some extent of Benedict. And he kind of went out on his own, and you know, Francis called him in, and you know, kind of said no more of that stuff, but he didn't fire him. You know, he was gentle with people, and then when the time came, he put somebody else in. You know, has changed around, that we're not promoting the Tridentine Mass anymore. It still is being allowed, but very restricted, depending on the bishop and all the rest of it. So anyway, I think the main thing that I would see is that the Curia had a bunch of princes with their own fiefdom. They were running their own place in their own way. And there was no oversight of the whole thing in a sense. So it was sort of a, everybody on their own. And he has brought them all together, and they're all now dicasteries, as opposed to you're a congregation, or you're an office of this, or you're a secretariat of that. And, they were each kind of doing their own thing in a certain respect. So he has pulled them all together, and he's made it quite clear that the leader doesn't need to be an ordained person, with rare exceptions, I think, with the different offices. And I don't know the details of that. And he's been little by little moving lay people into significant positions and women into significant positions. And he's probably going to have a woman voting. This is the French Sister Nathalie Bacquart, who is with the Synod, the Office for the Synod, whatever the proper title is. It's not a dicastery. It's the Synod for Bishops. That's what the office is about. And she's going to be a woman there, and supposedly she's going to be able to vote. And he's letting, just the other day, they allowed that brothers in religious communities
I saw that.
Yes, can become the superior of a community that is brothers and priests,
A lay
Mhm.
brother can be the head of the Jesuits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lay brother,
Yeah.
really? Oh,
Yeah.
According to
wow.
that article I read, yeah.
Yeah. So, I
Well, a
think,
professed Jesuit, a non-ordained Jesuit, in other
Yeah.
words.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of the head of the Vatican Observatory, Brother Guy Consolmagno, whom,
yeah,
I have frequent dealings with the Vatican Observatory. I'm a member of their foundation and, supported.
you are. Oh, didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I donate $100 a year to them. That's it. But I've always had an interest in astronomy. But there are very few Jesuit brothers. Guy Consolmagno, a late vocation, is one of them. He's quite well renowned, but I doubt that he'll ever be the superior general. But it would be possible for him to be superior general now. They wouldn't go out and get a well, if you're not ordained and therefore you're lay, I guess you could call them lay brothers. But I would say, he is certainly a professed religious.
yeah.
Bob, as we put it back in your court, do you find that the US bishops in general are not as enthralled with and appreciative of what Pope Francis is doing there?
Oh, for sure not. The majority not. I think he's got a fair, strong and very able group that are very supportive of Francis. I think a lot of it started with John Quinn, and then he gave rise to John Wester, and I think Supich and then you have who's the guy down in San Diego now? What's his name?
Oh,
I know it, but I can't remember.
it's very good, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a good, strong group, and I think they're appointing better bishops that are less ideological and very conservative. I think he's got a majority of his appointees in the College of Cardinals now are men that, I mean, he was picking these people from the strangest places all over the world. It wasn't, you're an
Indeed.
archbishop in a big city, so you should be a cardinal. Well, they all thought that, and he said, no, this guy is over in one of the Asian countries there. I'm going to make a cardinal over there.
Mhm.
So I think he's really introducing a tremendous amount of change that is much more engaging the full Catholic community. And he has from the beginning been trimming the whole clerical stance that we're something special. We're not at the margins. We're in the center, and we're in charge, and we know more than anybody else. And so we're running the place. I think he's done very effective work with regard to that. And with the reorganization of the college,
Yeah.
groups, yeah.
Yeah.
That it was the doctrine was top, and the bishops were top, and so each of them felt they were at the top of the thing. Said, no, you're all equal. All of you congregations, now dicasteries, you're all on the same level, And he moved evangelization with the Filipino cardinal that is the head of what used to be the evangelization. That's now considered to be the most important one, and Francis made himself as the Pope, as really the top guy in that specific thing. And then below that comes doctrine and so forth. So I think he's effecting enormously major changes that are going to be for the good of the church. With regard to the US, I would say if Francis has a third of our bishops really supportive and engaged with what he's trying to do and get done, I would say I'd be surprised if there's a third of them that are on that.
Wow.
But he's gaining.
I think one of the things that speaks to that is the response of the U.S. bishops to the synod on synodality.
Synod
Totally
of the
underwhelmed.
laity. Yeah.
And contrasting that with this furor over
Germans.
specific belief in the real presence as defined by transubstantiation, and they're doing a 2-year Eucharistic renewal essentially on worship of the Eucharist, not on celebration of the Eucharist, but on worship of the Eucharist, which in LA we've got, I think, Gomez strongly behind that, with beginning to get people and materials out about that Eucharistic renewal that we didn't see similarly emphasize the synod. And I think
Or Laudato Si, or Fratelli Tutti.
Yeah, that kind of fits in with
all fall by the side.
that kind of fits in with Carol Houselander's poem. Everybody's there honoring the Eucharist, and Tim, and they're closing down these social service things that parishes were doing that were great. That you described in your parish that were shut down.
Yeah.
But Bob, it's interesting because when I was in Rome, I experienced how the church is influenced by the local culture and government, the Roman. And I thought, I'm from
Romanita.
Right. And being from the USA, I thought, well, gee, we have a democratic way of thinking about things. And so it seems like, flash forward to now, it seems like the American bishops would be for what Francis is doing because it's all in terms of democracy. But I think, unfortunately, it represents the politicization of the American bishops, because of most of them are for Trump, even though he's a scoundrel and so forth. And but how they could do that is beyond me. But it's just amazing that Francis is like a democratic pope, right? Trying to legitimately, so not just in some ideological sense, but trying to bring to the fore leaders from all sectors. And I've been very.
How much influence do you think Ratzinger had on the condition we have now?
Big time.
No.
Well, he was, he was there from 82 as John Paul II's chief guy when he put him in charge of doctrine and so forth, and then he succeeded him. And I think he's a really substantive theologian, but he wasn't made for leadership, I think, at the top level. And so I salute him that he kind of did see that this is over his head, and so he retired. I think that was good. I think his teaching was good, but I think my perception of him is he was one of the heroes at the council. He was one of the chief theologians that brought a lot in. I forget the German bishop that was a key leader, and he was the theologian for him. In any case, then he became a bishop, and then he was at a university as a I don't know if it was before he became a bishop, I think. And in '68, you had all that revolution that was going on in the US and in Europe and so the rest, and he got scared. And so he was from that point, I think, very conservative and very protective and very careful. And so I think that with him and with John Paul II, it was 35 years of a pretty buttoning down kind of attitude.
Yep.
And you know that we were going to go anyway. You could say all kinds of things about that. So I salute him because he resigned.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think that took guts.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And humility. In a real
That's
sense.
the other word, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think what Francis, in my view, Francis has gotten something started that in some respects, I mean, it's a mirror image of what John the 23rd did. So John the 23rd comes in at 78 or something like that, you know, and he's only there for 5 years, but he sets in motion something that has persisted long before those 5 years, although it was dulled, and that was the council. That he had it going enough that Paul VI was not going to stop it, you know, so it went through. Well, then, you know, it was kind of had the shower that was came down on it as John Paul wanted to really stop it, stop the experimentation, the excitement, the novelty, the different ways, you know, and so along comes Francis, old as he is. He's going, what, on 85 or something like that?
Yeah. Hmm.
So, but he has put in place something that's not going to be stopped. Like John the 23rd dying a year after the first session, it didn't stop. And what Francis has done, I think it's a whole restructuring. And I think that the congregation of cardinals, although he hasn't done a lot to bring them all together, but those that have to elect a new pope, I think they'll elect somebody who's going to keep the Francis direction moving.
Ojalá que sí.
One hopes.
Bob, I came across, and I put in one of my emails, I think, that at the end of the Vatican Council, you know, the Second Vatican, 40 or 60 bishops got together.
Yes.
Alder Camera was one of them. And I wonder, you know, Bergoglio wasn't a bishop then at that time, but I wonder who made up that group. But that was amazing. I found that little tidbit really fascinating. Did you know about it at the time? I never knew about that.
I remember reading about it. Yes, I hadn't, you know, it wasn't at the front of my mind. So when you talked about that, I said, yeah, I remember that group. And Camera embodied it. He was just terrific. He embodied that simplicity and that humility.
Right.
You know, and then I think it went back to the old way. And so Francis, you know, he wore black shoes when he became Pope, and he went over and paid his own way at the hotel. And although, so he's really brought it down, I think, significantly. I'm not sure he's won over everybody. You take Burke, for example, and he still wants to have the 75-year-old or 75-foot-year-old train, or a 65-foot length as he goes down the aisle.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, absurd.
What were you talking about? That
Burke, Cardinal Burke.
Oh, that idiot.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And he stacked the episcopacy of the US. He was over there in the congregation for bishops. And so he was naming all these very, very conservative guys up and down the Pacific coast and in other places, you know, somehow.
No, he gave the world Gremer's favorite, Cordileone.
Yeah, yeah. And you can go all the way up, all the way up.
Tim, you lived in Florida, right?
Yeah,
What's the name of the city where the circus museum is? What's the name of that?
Sarasota or Brinkley, Barnum and Bailey Circus.
Right. So I went there, and I went to there's an art museum that the owners, what's the name of that circus? Yeah, right. Barnum and Bailey. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, if you go to a museum and you see a portrait gallery from, centuries ago, a few centuries ago, you see portraits of the kings and you see portraits of cardinals who are equally decked out and the same paraphernalia on the wall. And you can kind of get a sense of what the church has been through and what the people in the curia were used to doing. They were like those portraits on the wall, that was it. You made it, and it's so far away from Jesus of Nazareth trotting along the path there, touching and healing people and, talking with the Samaritan woman and, hanging out with lepers and all that type of stuff. It's really a jolt, and that's kind of a shock. Yeah.
So let me ask you.
So Francis is getting back to it. Yeah.
And so, has there been a head of the Archdiocese of LA in a long time that's not been a cardinal? And isn't your guy just still an archbishop?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. No, McIntyre was, Cantwell was not made a cardinal. McIntyre was made a cardinal after he was here for, 5, 6, 7 years in the early 1950s.
I
And
think
since then,
5.
in a cardinalatial see, where if you became archbishop with the next conclave, you would become a cardinal. And when Gomez was made archbishop with the next conclave, he was not made a cardinal. And he still has not made a cardinal.
No, what are conclaves?
Not conclaves.
I thought a conclave
no,
was
consistory.
Okay.
That's strange.
And so these
terminology.
So are these guys voted on by their peers as to whether or not they get the red hat? Is that how it works?
No, it's a personal choice of the Pope.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Philadelphia had the same thing. Philadelphia typically always got a cardinal. They don't have a cardinal now. I
So,
think that St. Louis often had a cardinal. They don't have a cardinal now. Baltimore doesn't have a cardinal now. Washington does.
so Bob, does a cardinal have to be a priest? I was
No.
reading that maybe a cardinal could be a woman, that the Pope could actually make a woman cardinal. Is that so, or?
It had been. I think that in the past, I think it was that you didn't have to be a priest to become a cardinal. So I'm trying to think, the French theologian, I'm blanking on that, but I think somebody invited him to be a cardinal. And then they did change the rule that you had to be an ordained priest to become a cardinal. And I think Francis is going to be changing that. It's all in canon law, that's what cardinals are supposed to be. And then Tim, the idea is 120 cardinals. So these are, seasoned bishops by and large that are scattered around the world. And the idea of the conclave is to get them all together, especially when it comes time to elect a new pope. And so, let's say that, let's go back to when Benedict resigned. So they all had to come to Rome, and they had some special liturgies and so forth, but they had a heck of a lot of talking of who's going to be the best person to move into that next. And one of the guys, Robert Mickens, I don't know if you get La Croix International, but he was actually a seminarian from Toledo, and then he worked with he was over at North American for just a year, and then he went to work for the Jesuits in the radio system over there. And now he's the American guy that is running La Croix International, and he writes a wonderful piece every Friday or Saturday that is very informative about. Pardon?
Mickens?
Yeah, right. Robert Mickens. So anyhow, he told the story. Actually, this goes back to 2013 when the Association of Priests, we gathered up in Seattle, and he was one of our speakers. And so he was planning to come over and give a talk in June at our assembly. And then Benedict resigned, and you know, Francis went in. Well, he was down there checking out all the news he could, meeting with people. And he was walking along the street with Bergoglio, who wanted to retire. I mean, he had tried to step down from.
Really?
There's an interesting movie about that. Anyhow, you know, Mickens asked him, he said, well, how are you feeling? He said, I'm a little bit concerned. I'm a little bit concerned, you know, about that. So in any case, he then got elected because he only had 3 major points that he articulated to the conclave of bishops. So he didn't, you know, of cardinals. He didn't give a long lecture. He had 3 basic principles and fundamentally said, this place has to get reorganized in effect. And they voted him in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, so did you say, Bob, that you felt that the majority of voting cardinals, I guess if you're over 75, you don't get to vote in the conclave, but do you think the majority, 80, do you think the majority of cardinals are Francis supporters?
I do, because I think
Okay.
he has offered more than half of what establishes the consistory that will be electing a pope. So I think that all the ones that are in there are persons that he chose because they're pastors.
Well, but only barely, Bob. He is not like a 70% majority.
No, that's right, but it's above 50.
Yes, it is, but it's
Yeah.
like, it's close.
You're right. Hopefully he'll hang on for another 5 years, you know, and then he'll have all of them in his pocket. In his dead pocket.
I wonder
hope so.
what kind of medical appointments he has.
I
Good
think
point,
he's
George.
been
Has
having,
a hip
Let's-
problem,
he's got a-
walking, and
Got a very bad hip. He's
Yeah.
got
yeah,
sciatica,
yeah,
very bad. And we don't know about his innards, you know?
yeah.
He had
No.
the surgery. He had that surgery. That
Yeah.
moved out a big piece of his colon.
Yeah,
You know, he lost a significant part of one of his lungs, I think, when he was a young man.
wow.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So, and yet he's energetic as heck. I think his mind is as clear as a spotlight, you know. His disposition and attitude, he's always smiling, mostly smiling. He's a remarkable man in my book.
Yeah,
he's
you know, I always think of,
wonderful,
I think of Pope Francis and the Dalai Lama as kind of a similar spiritual leaders. You know, they kind of convey simplicity, humor, you know, down there with the people type of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
much
And
like John
Desmond
23rd.
Tutu, yeah, but he's no longer with us.
Yeah. There's a
Don't you-
movie of the Dalai Lama and Tutu having a conversation. There's a movie about that.
Is there?
A real
Is that,
conversation, meaning the two of them really there having this conversation. Somebody made a movie with it.
did you see that, Bob?
I did see it. Yeah, it was very interesting to watch
Yeah.
them talk, full of joy,
Yeah,
full of joy.
yeah,
And I think that's Francis. He's he's a happy guy.
yeah.
Yeah, Bob, don't you think he's a lot like John the 23rd?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
You know,
yeah. They pulled him out of nowhere. You know, he had no big position in the Vatican.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have great admiration for him.
And he has to suffer. Well, I don't know. I think he's pretty thick-skinned. You know, he's
You
not
better be.
Yeah, he's not a delicate flower. Herbert Ryan used to have this expression for people. He called them people of sensitivity, and he called them orchids. If Herbert called you an orchid, he meant
You're
you were
delicate.
kind of you know, fragile.
Fragile and delicate.
But
Yeah,
better to be a dandelion.
Yeah.
there you go.
Oh yeah, he's an orchid.
Well, gentlemen, we are at
Yes.
12:08.
Yes,
Well,
I'm glad I joined you today.
Well, I'm glad that you
well,
did
enjoy
too.
it.
or wait.
It's been rich and thank you.
It has been good, and we'll keep bringing our own enrichment to one another by
And
email
let's,
this week. And
Yeah.
and let's hope that all of your medical appointments work out to be satisfactory. Just-
Yeah. One,
by
yeah,
the way,
one person, yeah.
next week I'm going to be in Cambria. I and my friend Karen are
Where?
going up to Cambria, California.
Okay, great.
Oh, okay.
So, but the place where we're
Ned
going to
went,
be,
didn't Ned go,
yeah,
What?
Ned went up there a couple of months ago, didn't he?
right.
So does that mean there won't be a session next Friday?
No, that means that my background will be a little different. But I'm
Okay.
Oh, wonderful.
thinking that,
Good.
it has good, the place where we'll be has good Wi-Fi, and
Okay,
we've been there before. And so I think I'll be able to make it as usual,
Good.
barring
Good.
any last minute changes or problems. So
Let me recommend a closing Hail Mary then for our closing prayer. Pray for the people of Ukraine
And Buffalo.
and
Yep.
Buffalo. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah. In the Father and the Son, the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Hail Mary,
Hail Mary,
full of grace.
Grace.
The Lord is with thee.
With the-
bless.
Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy.
Holy
Holy
Mary,
Mary, Mother of God, pray for
pray for us
Pray for
sinners.
us sinners,
Now,
now and at the hour of our
you
death.
know, our death.
Amen.
Amen.
speaking
Have
of
a
Buffalo,
beautiful weekend.
yeah, one
Yep.
thing I want to bring up in a conversation next Friday. I will be here after all. It was the following Friday. I have my medical appointment, but I saw a wonderful, joyful panel about Sister Thea Bowman.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Wilton Gregory was there. Georgetown has renamed one of their chapels after her, and this was a.
Oh,
Bob,
you
did you
sent
see
us
that?
George?
Yeah. Did any of you view that?
I did.
Yep.
Yeah. What do you think of it? Wasn't it
Fabulous.
marvelous?
She's terrific.
Yeah, she's terrific. Yeah. So I
Can-
think he,
Send a
Tom,
link for the rest of us.
yeah, and also the Catholic Worker, I get their little newspaper that they put out in New York, and it has a column on 6 Black people who are being proposed as saints. Thea Bowman is one of them.
Yeah.
5
She's
others
from
and
a-
so forth.
Yeah, she was born, Sandra's from Mississippi, and so Thea Bowman spent many years in this small town north of Jackson called Canton. In fact, she was a teacher there, and her parents moved there from either Yazoo City or Jackson after her birth. And so I said to Sandra, I said, she was there teaching, when you had your cousins and your aunts and uncles live there. And she says, never ever heard anything about her. So it's kind of a real small world kind of thing. So
Yeah.
wonderful.
Just an amazing
All right, we'll
person.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
See you guys
Tom,
next week.
Tom,
sorry.
do your computer search skills enable you to find that 60-minute session where she was interviewed by Mike Wallace? I have tried to dredge it up, and I
Yeah,
can't.
me too. Yeah, I've tried. Yeah.
I remember seeing it live.
Really?
but,
Uh,
oh
Uh-huh.
yeah. And he didn't know what to do with her. He was quite taken with her.
yeah.
I'll try to look it up.
These guys.
Okay.
and see.
Okay.
Okay, God bless you
Bye,
all.
guys.
Good one.
Bye.
Bless you. Have a good
God
weekend.
bless.
See you around the